Professor Jeff Spurlock, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing this morning, Matt? Today?
Today, you know what? I have been looking forward to this conversation for weeks. You and I met. First off, you're the associate chair of the integrated media department at Boise State University.
That's correct.
You and I met at a media career day, which was great. You guys very kindly invited me to come over. I'm like, me? Like, sure.
We wanted you, Matt.
Yeah, apparently. And, media is one of those things that is changing. It seems every single day, different platforms, different mechanisms of communication. I remember when X was Twitter, and it just, you had very specific amount of characters you could, and now it's like you can put a 2-hour video on it. We have, obviously our classic video platforms like YouTube, but, that has spurred various platforms like Rumble and Vimeo and all kinds of different things. So the media landscape is constantly changing around preferences with people, what people want to engage in. And really, it seems to be one of these great, unfolding in front of our eyes, like meritocracies and industries that are going to abide by the laws of power. As you have more people producing things, you'll have fewer and fewer people grabbing attention. And, again, it's like 1% gets 90% of the views or something like that. And it's just a wild thing to see play out. And you are at the hub of it.
Let's go back, if you will.
Okay.
I was born in 1957.
All right.
So I'm a few years old. I was born in 1957 from Nashville, Tennessee. So I grew up in Nashville. In the 1960s and the 1970s, media, as we knew it then,
sure,
the news media, you had three media: television, newspapers, radio. Newspapers came out one time a day. Television, 2 times a day, 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock.
Sure.
Radio, you had an hourly update. Sometimes every hour, or just whenever that radio station just happened to have newscasts. And that was it. Social media, the internet, computers, what was that? When I was growing up, computers, the only people who used computers were NASA and the government. Right. Nobody had a personal computer in their house unless they were a computer guru, or that's what they did for a living.
And correct me if I'm wrong.
Nobody had it. Yeah.
The original personal computers were actually owned by the computer companies. They would lease them to you, right? So they essentially, it was like, they had this equipment that nobody could personally own. It's like, no, I'll loan it to you. You're going to pay me a lot of money.
Absolutely.
But I'll come and maintain it. It's going to sit over here. Don't you touch it. If there's a problem, it's like a giant printer or a Xerox or something. It's like, no, you don't own this. This is mine.
It's exactly. And I never touched a computer. I will tell you this. I worked in television news for 15 years after I graduated from college, and radio and TV news. And computers did not exist. Not with us, really not with any news outlet that you had in America. We had typewriters. Remember those things? You could probably see them in the Smithsonian or in Grandma or Grandpa's house, but that's what we had, manual typewriters. If we were lucky, we had an electric typewriter. We'd put a sheet of paper in the carriage, and we would just type away. That was our news, and we'd deliver it to the consumers. And that's what news was all about back then. The information was all about back then. Then we had this thing called cable TV. Remember that? Cable TV, where you had more than just 3 channels, ABC, CBS, and NBC. You then started having some other cable channels. ESPN, CNN came around in early 1980s. The Weather Channel, things like this. And they existed, and people started watching them, but that was just a few of them. Now it's like what Bruce Springsteen said: 57 channels and nothing on. A lot of people are going that route, and they have been going that route for a long time. Television news, radio news, newspapers. People don't read the newspapers anymore. I teach at Boise State University, and I ask my students the first day of my media writing class, where do you get your news? Where do you get your information? How many of you read a newspaper daily? No hands. How many of you read a news magazine? No hands. How many of you watch television news? A few. How many listen to radio? A few. How many listen to podcasts? A lot. How many listen to or get your news and information from social media? Just about everybody. And then I'll ask which platform do you use? And they'll tell me which ones that they pretty much subscribe to on a daily basis to get their information. But you think about it, when I was growing up, we couldn't even fathom what's going on right now, Matt, as far as where we're getting our information. There's no way there's no way that I could have thought when I was a college senior, 22 years old in 1979, that in 2025, 50 years later or so, that I'd be getting information on my telephone, that I'd be getting information on my watch. Telephones, as we knew it, they're not like what we have now. We didn't have smartphones. You had the rotary dial, rotary dial that you could call somebody and that's it. I'm not as savvy as my daughter is on my telephone, because I use my telephone for to call people and to text, and and to find directions. Right. But you can do so much with that, as you well know. There's so much that you can do with that. It's just got unfathomable about what's happening now and what's going to happen in the future.
I mean, gosh, when you talk about what's going to happen in the future, there's no way. I mean, you could tell me anything. I'd probably believe it. I'd probably believe it at this point. Mm-hmm. There's so much. Amazing that you asked that question starting off. I actually had Dr. Andrew Finistuin in yesterday. I believe, I'm going to screw up his name, but he's, I was talking to him about how we were talking about, he runs the Foundation or Institute for Furthering American Values at BSU. Okay. And we were talking about freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And one of the interesting things he said is like, I don't consume any social media. And I didn't know that about him, right? He knew he was coming on a podcast and, that I put stuff out on social media. But what was very interesting is I asked him, I'm like, okay, how did you know what happened in the legislative session? Because during the legislative session that I was down at the Capitol, I did like 170 interviews within the roughly 90-day period of the session. Right. Now, I am pretty well versed with a lot of the things that happened there. And that information went out in podcast form, and it also went out onto social media platforms. But I don't know of any journalistic publication that kept up with all of the various bills. I mean, I'm talking about things from, revising the 911 system to deportation laws. I mean, that's kind of a hotter one. Obviously, school choice was a big one, but we had all of these maintenance bills, water. Like, who knows about the wrangle between the $30 million water line item that was going on between the Department of Water Resource. Yeah. Nobody knows about this stuff. And I don't know any publication that was covering it. So it was almost like, in the absence of having the social media platform, how would you find out about it? And his answer was like, well, I have government affairs people and other people that inform me. But it's like, but I don't have a team. Like, the average person doesn't have a team of people sitting down there and then educating you. It has to be, there's a magic to social media access. Like you and I sitting here right now. Right. Okay. I would like to imagine that if I just got a hold of you as a random passerby and said, hey, Professor Spurlock, like, I'd love to grab coffee with you and just chat. And you're like, well, I don't drink coffee, but I'll come hang out with you. I would love to imagine that you'd be able to do that. But at scale, that would be impossible. Like, you can't do that with 100 people. You can't do it with 100 people, even in a 5-year time frame. Like, you don't have time for this. Right. But you and I can sit down and have this conversation, and people that would never have access to you get the benefit of it. And if we do it correctly and we enjoy ourselves in an authentic manner, then more people see it. And it's like this canned thing that nobody watches it. So it's this, again, back to this meritocracy of you have access to people in a way that you've never had access to them. And the more people enjoy it, the more people see it. What a crazy proposition for a communication platform.
And a lot of the people, Matt, are not taking advantage of what we have, or they're saying they're taking it with a grain of salt. Like they've always known it. They've always known that the internet's been here. They've always known that social media, and I'm talking about my students, always known that social media has been here, that the internet's been here, that they're taking it for granted. Like, okay, what else is out there? Like we said earlier, where's the future? We have no idea. Have no idea. So they're saying, what else is out there? And I kind of go back to radio with Americans, and Americans are the laziest people in the world. I'm an American. Yeah. I'm an American, but I'm not the only one who says that. We are the laziest people in the world because we want everything coming to us. A lot of us, I say us, I use that pronoun.
Just say you and me.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah.
We say, yeah, we've got this, but what else do we have out there?
Sure.
You had radio. And that was a wonderful medium. It was a wonderful entertainment medium. You had entertainment, but you also had news and information. So Americans said, okay, what else is there? So a guy by the name of Philo Farnsworth said, hey, I've got this idea. And he invented television. So basically it was radio with pictures because Americans were bored.
Right.
And so he invents this thing. Ooh, that's neat. That's neat. So people started doing that. After a while, they got they had their regular channels, and then they got cable, and then we had satellite, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then, okay, we've done this. What else do you have out there? And the internet comes around, and we have social media, and we have podcasts, and we have everything that we have now. But I'm 68 years old. I don't know how long I'm going to be around, but let's say I'm around for 30 more years, and I hope I am. Maybe even
I hope so too.
Thank you. I hope I'm even around even longer than that. But I'm thinking 30 years from now, when I'm close to 100, who knows what's going to go on in the next 30 years? I have no idea, because I will ask my students, has Bill Gates reached his pinnacle? Probably not. Has Elon Musk reached its pinnacle? Probably not. We don't know what it is. And there's another guy that's coming up, or another guy in the next 20 years, another woman in the next 20 years. They're going to come up with the next sliced bread. Right. So who knows what's going to happen? Man,
who knows what's going to happen? Yeah. Right. Within the media landscape, there was a friend of mine who was big into music, and still is. Yep. Was in high school. I was in band with him, and he was very, very talented. And he, in the early 2000s, 2005, 2006, he actually had a really good finger on the pulse of the music industry, because he said, look, it used to be that music was like, if you wanted to make it, you had to get the record deal. You had to, go through these channels. There were these gatekeepers that were this record industry Goliath, and you couldn't make it without them. And then obviously we got like iTunes, and we got all of these other things. So you could have independent people making music. You could have independent people spreading the music around. The record companies became less relevant. And he always said, he was like, look, his phrase was always, it's going to be a dying giant, right? You have these Goliaths of industry that are going to become less and less relevant until they just keel over and kaboom, the world shakes, right? But that didn't exactly happen, right? Like we do have incredible musicians like Oliver Anthony, very popular guy who was making this music and then all of a sudden just took off like 2 years ago because of a video he put out on YouTube. We have those cases, but we haven't had a complete detachment from the record industry, right? Like it still exists. It still brings value. And of course it was going to pivot and figure out what it could do. But what do you think if we were going to look into a crystal ball and say, hey, look, we now have podcasts, like just looking at the presidential election. Do you think that the mainstream media is going to claw back market share that, let's say, Joe Rogan grabbed by having, President Trump on as a candidate? Like, is there a world where he got 100 million, let's say he got 100 million views for President Trump. Is there a world where like the media claws that back somehow and he gets fewer views in the future?
I have no idea.
Come on,
I have no idea.
I thought you knew.
I have no idea. I mean, it's just every day it's something different.
Right.
I couldn't tell you if it's going to go way back to what I grew up with. I know it's not. I know it's not because we have so many avenues, so many platforms out there right now that people are utilizing. I don't know. And I wish I had the answer for you, Matt, but I don't. And I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's these are weird problems. Like here's something. I spoke with a former news broadcaster recently, and he said that the bulk of the views and attention that their news channel, major news channel, gets actually come off of social media. Now they do the production and they produce and publish onto local news daily, but that's not actually where they're getting their hits. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. How then do you square with the whole monetization mechanism of we're only existing because we run ads on television, right? Well, if you're running ads on television, but you're not actually getting the views on television, you're getting your views off of, let's say, Instagram, and Instagram doesn't really monetize, then how do you keep up the production cost?
And let's talk about the content there, the content of what they're seeing right now. If you remember, news used to be, let's see what's happening with the city council. Let's see what's happening with the school board. What's the mayor doing? What's the governor doing? Those were certainly important daily pieces of information that people needed to know. But is that what they wanted to hear? Is that what they wanted to see? You've probably heard the old adage, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yep.
Which means that if it's drama, if it's a bad accident, if it's horrendous weather, a hurricane, tornado that destroys a town, that's what people are interested in viewing or watching. Yeah, the city council is great. Yeah, they're going to raise taxes, but is that what we're going to talk about tomorrow? Because television news, radio news, any type of news and information, it's a business, and they are in competition with everybody else because it's what people are talking about. What are people talking about? And if it's the city council raising taxes to build a new library, oh, that's wonderful. That's great. Are people interested in that? No. They want to see something else. They want to be entertained because television news is in competition with reruns of the Andy Griffith Show. They're in competition with MTV, if it still exists. I'm not sure.
Right.
And with the gardening channel, with the shopping network, with food networks, this type thing. It's another just here's what's on right now. Okay, I didn't like that story, so I'm going to go to the shopping network, see what I can buy. That's what we're in. That's what we're looking at right now.
I had an original podcast before I moved from the state that shall not be named, and I was covering a lot of stuff that was going on in academics. My first long format, like real interesting interviews were for school board elections, which I got into and I really enjoyed. And it's the first time I actually learned what the school board did. And they hire the superintendent, they give direction, this whole bit, right? And there was something that had happened. I can't remember exactly what had happened, but something had happened and there was, some drama in the community. And somebody reached out to me and said, hey, this is a real problem. And I looked into it. I'm like, oh yeah, that does seem like a problem. So I kind of dove into that. And 2020 to 2022, there were no shortage of problems within the community. Mm-hmm. But what I realized is during a particular lull, after, I'd kind of interviewed whoever I had interviewed for that particular issue, that there was a tendency, there was an immediate inclination towards like, okay, well, what else is wrong? Right. And that got me realizing really quickly, oh no, if you go down this road, you're going to be inclined to see problems where there aren't problems. And sure enough, there was a thing where I was like, gosh, I mean, if I squint just right, then I can kind of see, or like maybe I could make this, okay, this is a problem, but there's not that much there. So maybe I can make like a broader comment about it. And I realized really quickly, like, oh, this is the problem. This is the media problem. I want conflict to feed to these people because they have now started reaching out and expecting me to cover these conflicts. First off, 90% of the things people reach out to me with are kind of junk, or they're obviously two sides. So I could either try to cover both sides or recognize that it's complex and your allegation is not really accurate, or I could just run with the allegation and be like, this is what people are saying. I don't know if it's true, but it's what they're saying. You know, it's that kind of incentivization structure that it really seems to be the thing that has driven down what we all expect from, you know, written journalism and news media, just because they have to. Like they got to go after that next thing that people are upset about.
If I may,
please.
One thing, and it's just springboarding just
Sure.
what you just said, Matt. When I got into news, I guess the impetus that got me into news, I was a sophomore in college, and I saw All the President's Men. I read the book All the President's Men by Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, Washington Post reporters who brought down President Nixon. That's what said, hey, I want to be a reporter. I want to be a reporter. I want to be just like Carl Bernstein. I wasn't, but I wanted to be him. I wanted to be that investigative journalist. When you were just saying about one thing and then you got to follow through, see what else is there? What else is there? It's the same thing with that. It started out with a break-in at the National Democratic headquarters at the Watergate Hotel. That's all it was. It was a break-in. But the people who were breaking in they weren't just your nickel and dime thieves. Thieves. They were, one was a former CIA guy. You know, they were educated people thinking, okay, the news of the day today was that the Democratic headquarters was broken into. That's the news. But there had to be something else. And Deep Throat, who was their source, said, you're not on it. Follow the money. What else is out there? And he would give them little tips that they would have to follow up. And it led from the break-in of a little office to the bringing down of the President of the United States and a lot of his key White House aides, his assistants. That's pretty big stuff where one little thing, a break-in, leads to the downfall of the most powerful man in the free world. And I love it. I thought that was incredible. And that's kind of like what you're saying here is that, yeah, we know this happened at the school board.
Right.
But was that it? Do we move on to another story? Maybe some did, but you had the forethought thinking, there's something else here. Right. And I'm going to go and dig deeper.
Do you remember the original Batman movie?
Of course.
Yeah, man. Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
And he kills the mayor in that movie with a pen. He throws this pen, hits him right in the throat. And he's like, turns around, he's like, the pen is mightier than the sword. That was the first time I had heard that phrase, you know, as a young person.
Yeah.
And with the investigative journalists, you know, industry and realm and place in society, it has always appeared to me that it's like, here's this person who has this small tool, right? It's just a little pen, but the capacity and power of communication, which is ultimately what it comes down to. Communication and uncovering truth is far more powerful than, say, the President of the United States if wielded correctly. And that's the thing that investigative journalism and information and communication has always been to me. It's this like elusive, like ultimate power if wielded correctly. Also, like the One Ring, right? Because if you get intoxicated with your capacity and you think you're special in wielding this power, you fall by the wayside. If you get tempted by the trappings of power, by the attention, by popularity, you fall by the wayside. So it's this ultimate power that's ultimately corrupting, but is undeniably powerful in practice. And it's so unique. And I think to that end, I think people want to find a place to use it. It's like, I got this cannon. I want a target to shoot at because I want to feel like I'm uncovering this truth. And that leads people, again, the intoxication of like, I broke the story. Can I tell you, this is hilarious. Okay. I find out recently there's a there's a gal who runs a podcast in there. It doesn't matter who or what, but she's no great fan of mine, which is totally fine. She's like, plenty of people don't like me. Totally fine. But
I like you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I like you too, sir. She was apparently planning to do some expose on me and what I do and like who I am and like my actual intentions. It's like, okay, man. And I find this out because somebody told me that this gal had reached out to this individual and said, I'm going to do this expose on Matt. I think he's actually like this Russian operative, which I thought was hilarious. And she was because there's a nonprofit associated with my platform called Truth and Media. And there is this other Truth and Media that's incorporated in like New Hampshire or something, like way out there. And she was like, yes, this must be it. And the person she was talking to was like, okay, I'm not saying don't do that, but it looks like this other Truth and Media that was incorporated in like 2019 before Matt ever knew Idaho existed. And like, yeah, it looks like it might have board members in Russia, but obviously like Matt's was incorporated in 2024. Like these are two different, completely different entities. And I always laughed at it. It's like, what did you think was going to happen? Like you thought you were uncovering this incredible thing and you were going to use the power of your communication to like bring down a portion of like the Russian, spy system or something. It's like, that must have been, for the moment you thought it was going to work, that must have been incredible. It must be like, oh my God, I'm going to show the world. But it's like, reality is not that interesting, man. like I'm not, like, if I'm a Russian asset, I'm doing a really bad job at it.
And she it was a woman, correct?
The person, yes, that was originally intending to do it, then thought better of it.
That's right. But she found out, or she heard that you were a Russian operative. Some person told, Jimmy told Lisa,
right.
Lisa told Billy, Billy told this person.
Yeah.
Oh, I've gotten 3 sources that say that Matt Todd is a Russian operative. I've got to get him on, or I've got to expose this guy.
Yes.
I have to expose this guy. Without any further research, it's just, well, it's got to be true. 3 people, I've gotten 3 sources. They're probably not credible sources, but they each say the same thing. So it's got to be true. And so I'm going to expose him. And found out that it's not the case. Do you remember the War of the Worlds, Orson Welles?
Yes.
1938 or 1939. When it happened, and it was just a radio broadcast. It was a Halloween prank, basically on a radio station. And they said it at the beginning. Just let me tell you, this is a radio show. It's a program. It's an entertainment program. Right. So don't be alarmed because it's Halloween. Don't be alarmed. So people tune in the middle. They hadn't heard at the beginning. They tune in the middle, and they hear that the Martians have invaded this little town in New Jersey. It's got to be true. It's on the radio. I'm hearing it. So people went out into the streets and they went to churches and say, the Russians or the Martians are coming. The Martians are coming. Leave, go to the hills, go to the woods, everything. And it was a radio show. It was a radio. They weren't investigating. They weren't checking their sources. If they were educated, if they had a little intellect, they would call the radio station and say, is this for real? And a lot of people did. Or some people said, oh, this is just Orson Welles on a radio show.
Yeah, right.
It's a lot of like what you're saying there is that investigate before you put it on, because you don't want to mislead your audience, your consumers, because you're on the air, so they think you know everything.
Right.
And that's not always the case. That's not always the case, but hey, it happens.
Do you think one of the structural difficulties that legacy media, constrained by time and platforms and stuff, do you think one of the structural difficulties that they encounter is that it is so hard to elaborate on all of the nuances of something? So they're like, listen, because I mean, when I talk to somebody, I just had a gentleman in here, Professor McKay Cunningham, who's University of Idaho. Mm-hmm. He used to be a law professor, a bunch of different things, and very, very well qualified. And he came in to talk about whether or not we're in a constitutional crisis, mm-hmm. and what that means, how people are defining it. That conversation was like an hour long. And we talked about a myriad of different things, and including, hey, if we're in a constitutional crisis right now because there was an executive order issued, what kind of constitutional crisis do you think we'd be in if there was an executive order issued that we were going to deny due process and we were going to hold people indefinitely in offshore, prison facilities?
Mm-hmm.
People would lose their minds. Okay. But that's what presidents have been doing for years. I'm sure you remember Obama ran on a platform of, I'm going to shut down Guantanamo Bay the first month in office. It didn't get shut down, and people got held without due process for years, like a decade, I think. So it's like, okay, even if we say this is a constitutional crisis, which some people feel it is, absolutely, and some people don't, absolutely, and some people are like, hey, verdict's out, let's wait to hear what the Supreme Court says. Mm-hmm. Regardless of all of that, is this the first constitutional crisis? Is this the first thing people should be worked up about if they're worried about honoring the Constitution? All of these things are these like hugely involved and nuanced and complex topics that just nobody has time for that if you got like a 4.5-minute segment before a commercial break.
That's exactly it. They don't have time. Probably every constitutional word, or every word in the Constitution, not just the Bill of Rights, not just the 27 amendments that we have, but every single word, every single word counts. But you're going to have differing opinions on every single word in the Constitution from somebody. Do we have enough time? There's no media outlet that has enough time to address every single thing. It would just be endless. There would be no commercial time. It would go straight through. Here's this.
Yeah. It's like watching the Snake River. You're never going to see all the water go by.
Exactly. And you have to pick and choose,
right,
what you listen to.
I think that when it's in a silo and it's like, hey, this is the news, this is all you get. You get 3 minutes, you get 5 minutes, you get whatever it is. It's like, okay, then this is the state of, like, I'm 6'2". I'm not 7 feet. I'm not 5 feet. That's the state of the world. Yep. Right. And I'll never be 7 feet, and I'll hopefully never be 5 feet. I'm 6'2" on the money.
Right.
When you have that finality in the structure of your world, there's a hesitancy to judge, because I'm not walking around saying, gosh, it would be great if I was 7 feet. It's like, listen, you're never going to be 7 feet. You're never going to be better looking. You're never going to be 7 feet tall. That's it, man. But I think one of the things that I'm trying to flush out was legacy news media destined to be pushed back on just because of the way it is, or was it destined to be pushed back on in contrast to the new sources of media that have emerged?
And you're talking about legacy news.
Yeah. So let's say news channel whatever, doesn't matter. You have a news channel that does nightly news, compared to, and they have the constraints that you and I just talked about, compared to different sources like this podcast, right? And I'm not advocating that I'm like the best source of local news, but it does throw into contrast the inherent limitations of what they can offer you, right? Like, they're not going to do an hour piece on a constitutional crisis. They don't have time.
No way.
But I'm not going to say that we wasted 55 minutes of the conversation. It was like, it was 60 minutes. Maybe we shave off 5, 6, 7 minutes. It's still over 50 minutes to flush out all of these things. And, so that's what I'm essentially getting at. Was news media destined to be looked at differently just because it is so short, or is it only because we now have alternatives that people are like, hey, maybe this isn't the best way?
Well, it's probably a little of both. When you and I get back to TV news because that's my background.
Sure.
A 30-minute newscast consists of 22 minutes of content, not necessarily news. And when I say news, that's a whole thing. It's 22 minutes of content, 8 minutes of ad space. In that time, you've got the news section, you have sports as well, and a weather forecast, the weather guy, the meteorologist gets on. So you got probably 11 or 12 minutes of news content. You got 5 or 6 minutes of sports, 4 or 5 minutes of weather, and your commercials. Wow. There's your 30 minutes. So can you squeeze everything that happened that day, news-wise, can you squeeze everything that happened that day in 11 minutes? No. The news producers, the news directors, the reporters, they're kind of the gatekeepers. This is what we're going to put on our 6 o'clock news tonight. If we don't have enough time, we'll put it on the 10 o'clock. We'll add it to that one. But now with social media and with every news outlet has some type of web platform. They all do. So they can put it on that.
Sure.
But can they put every single thing that happens in the day in their on their site or in their newscast? No way. Let me tell you something, Matt. This happened I finished working in news in 1994. I was the managing editor of the NBC affiliate in Evansville, Indiana.
Man, you missed the next 6 years.
Yeah.
That was some wild time, right? Like we had Congress vetoing Clinton. We had the impeachment. We had the .com bust. We had all kinds of stuff in the late 90s.
Oh, yeah. Exactly. I didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah.
So.
Had I known.
Yeah, exactly. So 94, I stopped news and I went back and got my master's and my PhD, and I decided to teach it. Total shift in careers. Still media related. I'm teaching it rather than I'm not a practicing journalist anymore. But sometime between 1990 and 1994, that was when I was in Evansville, and I don't know exactly which year that Magic Johnson was diagnosed with HIV. It was during that 4-year time. On that day, Magic Johnson was on top of the world. He was huge. Everybody knew him. NBC News, NBC Nightly News, the entire 30-minute newscast that NBC News only did stories on Magic Johnson, HIV, healthcare, just all based on Magic Johnson's diagnosis. For 30 minutes, that was it. Because I'm sitting in the news booth ready to go for our local news, and I'm watching this and I'm thinking, is that all that happened today in the United States? Was Magic Johnson being diagnosed with HIV? According to NBC News, yes. That was it, because that's what people wanted to hear. That's what people wanted to see. There was nothing during that 30 minutes that talked about what was happening in the White House, what was happening in Congress, what was happening outside the USA. It was just Magic Johnson. And it was an important story, certainly. I'm not downplaying that. But what I'm saying is that for 30 minutes, and that's all they had. Because they weren't going to come on again because social media hadn't been invented yet. So the next time that they were going to be on was the next day. Oh, here's what happened yesterday. We told you about Magic Johnson, but here's some other things that happened. Oh, here's what happened in the White House. Here's what happened in Congress.
And then, by the way, this is what's happening today.
That's right. Exactly.
Because you got to catch back up.
That's right. So to answer your question, kind of, I know it's a long-voluted answer that I gave you, but to answer your question, they don't have the time. They don't have the space for it.
Right.
And there are a lot of gatekeepers in media outlets that have to say, okay, we think this is probably more important than this story. We think that more consumers are going to be interested in what we're going to say here than here, and they go with that.
Yeah, I have a really big question around that specifically, but before I forget, the OJ trial was the exact same time frame, right? And my parents had gotten divorced. My dad got remarried, and they went on a honeymoon, and we were hanging out with my then step grandparents, and they had a little TV, like old school TV on the kitchen countertop that had nothing but the OJ trial on every day, all day, and it was a year in the trial, and then it went to court or something, or court and then trial. I can't remember whichever one. But the point is it was a year for each. So it was this 2-year time frame. Whenever I would go see them, they lived in Glasgow area in Montana.
Right.
Every time I would go see them, it was there's OJ again. It's like Johnny Cochran and stuff. It's pretty wild. Because again, and there's like, is nothing else happening on this channel? It's like just the OJ, just the OJ trial. Because
it was on everybody's mind.
It's on everybody's mind. There's an emergence of an alternate, like Bentham and Mills, utilitarianism, right? The concept that we base all of our decisions inherently on maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain. And you can stretch that out from like the minute today, right now, to like the day, to the, year, to like your whole life. That's why you find people doing things, obviously correct things like taking care of their family and kids, even though it's very difficult. It's like, okay, but it would be way worse if I didn't have a family and kids. And I would feel way more pain if I neglected people that I had already made, so it gets very complex, but the idea is you fundamentally try to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. Makes a lot of sense. You put your hand on the burner, take your hand off the burner. That's bad. Okay. And that to me seems to be analogous to the way that classic news has been made, which is, I think we are going to get the maximum number of viewership with this. And I think we need to minimize the number of people that turn it off here. Like, this is a very straightforward system. I want most viewers. I want the fewest number of people to walk away. That's all I want. Yeah. Okay. And in that way, the platforms became a function of just whatever people want. So what is the platform? I don't know. Yeah. The platform is whatever people want. And there was no space, especially when you're dealing with investors. Like, you got an investor, you have people that are looking for an ROI, you got advertisers that are spending money. You can't take a shot. You're like, hey, I made this decision because I thought it would get me the most viewers for your ad or for your return, like whatever it is, right? You had no opportunity to take chances. But we have this emergence now of low-cost media that can be done at a high, like for you and I sitting right here,
right?
For you and me, we have no cost associated with this aside from the upstart cost, right? Now it's just the cost of time, and I'm not worth that much, and you're worth more, so it costs us some, but it costs us.
I don't know about that.
Yeah. Well, let's just guess. But the point is, we have this thing where we can experiment, and the platform then becomes. It's not beholden to whatever I think will get me the most viewers. And that now can become, what am I interested in? And maybe what I'm interested in a long enough time frame is it becomes a collection of things that other people find interest in, but would not have engaged in normally. There's a chief of police that I chat with him frequently. And he told me a couple months ago, he's like, I listen to your show every day because I will be exposed to people I would never in a million years self-elect to listen to. He's like, but I'll listen to an hour conversation or 45-minute conversation with somebody that I had no interest in and be like, wow, I had no idea. So it's almost like the consumer, again, is not at the helm, because if the consumer's at the helm, we know where that leads. We're going for the max number of views based on whatever people tell us they want to see. But there's this alternate track of media content creation, which is, what if we had our own interests? Would people jump on that bus?
And they may. They may.
They may not, too.
Well, that's true. That's what I say. They may.
Yeah, right.
They may. One thing is that there are so many outlets out there, social media outlets, podcasts, this type of thing.
Unlimited.
Absolutely. That have, you might have a podcast, and I've listened to a few podcasts that are just on American history.
Sure.
You have podcasts that are just, I'm a big classic rock music fan. On rock music, I'm sure there probably is. If there's not, I'll invent it.
Yeah.
So, but there's an audience for everything. There's an audience for every type of platform out there. You have your audience, and I listen to your show a lot.
Oh, thank you.
You bet. And I was honored that you asked me to be on it. I was very honored when
I wouldn't miss the opportunity. This is great. I never get to talk about this stuff with people.
Well, when I met you a month or so ago, and I knew who you were, and then I wrote you say, thank you so much for being with us. And when you said, I'd love to have you on, I thought, you want to have me on? Oh boy,
you've arrived, Professor.
Well, I told my wife, I said, Matt Todd wants me on his show.
Oh my God, how embarrassing.
No, she said, the ranch? I said, the ranch. She said, when? I said, I don't know. But anyway, what were we talking about? Anyway.
Just that there's an alternate track of media that's emerging,
right,
that reflects an individual or a small group of people's actual personal interest that is not driven by what's going to get me the most views. And these two separate tracks produce different types of content. And there is at least now an opportunity for people to not self-select individual pieces. Like they select a platform that they now trust, even though they know the platform may take them in areas that they have no idea, as opposed to, we know this platform is going to go for the thing that gets us the most views.
And it's true. You're right. It's a little of both. You can have some, I'll go back a little bit. I always like to go back in history. So before I moved to Idaho 4 years ago, I was in Troy, Alabama, and lived there for 20 years. I was a professor at Troy University there. And there was his name was Richard Scrushy. I don't know if you know that name, but anyway, he was a big real estate developer in Alabama. Had dealings with just about everything. Very rich man, very rich. And he was tried and convicted on, and I can't remember. Tried and convicted on
something bad.
Because I don't want to say what it was, and that's wrong. Anyway, he served time in prison, gets out of prison, and starts now. I guess they really didn't have podcasts then, but he had a little radio show because he could afford it. He could afford he had a studio and had a frequency, and he would just come on, and because he became a born-again Christian while in jail. So he did a religious show, and he also added politics in there as well. But people listened to him because they knew who he was. A lot of the people who listened to him didn't like him because of what his past had done, because of his past. But they wanted to hear him. They wanted to hear what he was going to say that day. It may not be something that they wanted to hear, but they were interested in hearing what he was going to say. When people listen to you, they don't know exactly that day what they're going to hear. And because you have a good following, I listen to you, you have a good following of, let's see what Matt's going to say today. I'm going to see what's his show, who's he got on, and they do it for that. I don't know if that answered the question.
No. Again, you have an understanding of media that I am interested in. And what you're articulating, I think, is essentially the nature of somebody not knowing but following along is not inherently new, right?
Oh, no, not at all.
And that's, I appreciate that because, again, even with individuals that talk about politics and whatnot, it's interesting to remember, first off, it's like, look, perhaps this format existed in a different medium that I would never run. Like somebody on an AM radio frequency from like 30 years ago, I would never know to look there to see where I could do things better. But I'm always obviously looking to do things better. And that's really important regardless. But again, the idea that it's like, no, they're having, like Howard Stern was one of those great examples of somebody who's like, hey man, I'm gonna just do this ridiculous thing and see. I actually got this wild compliment recently from somebody who, the feedback you obviously get on social media seems to me to be just, unending. And a lot of times it's, kind of all over the place. And there are some people that have been commenting, engaging for some time now, perhaps over a year, that I'm like, no, that's a pretty regular person who likes to get a word in edgewise or other, or more. And that one person came up in my defense. There was a piece of content that got published and somebody had tagged me in it, and it was about, something that I had covered, and I had been criticized in the comment section. This person came up in my defense, which was wild. I hadn't commented. I just went over and looked. I'm like, oh my gosh. And the person said that, again, the compliment was really not that this person agreed with everything I say, but she doesn't always agree and doesn't always like it, but she hangs in there in spite of it. And I was like, God bless it, man. Like, I'm doing something right for that person, because the value proposition for her is not is not a guarantee. It's not safe. Do you remember that film Safety Guaranteed? Safety Not Guaranteed. It was like this hacky funny movie, but
Gotcha.
It was the whole like you'll engage in the journey with somebody even though you don't know what's going to happen. And you do know there have been times when you don't like it, but the value proposition is significant enough that you will go on the journey with them. And I was like, God bless it, man. I got one super fan.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, it's kind of like Johnny Carson, Tonight Show. I grew up with Johnny Carson, and it's the same thing. I turned on Johnny Carson every single night. It may not have been a good show, but I loved him. And I didn't agree with everything that his guests had on there, but I knew Johnny was going to do something
valuable.
that was going to be valuable and is going to be entertaining. And that's probably with you. You know, I'm going to listen to Matt because he's going to have something that's going to interest me, and I'm going to continue. I'm going to continue listening to his show today.
Here's a question for you. I don't think there are many contemporary figures that can get away with that. Like Bill Maher is one that really can piss off his liberal base. And he, tries to hold people really accountable. But what you're saying of like, here's this national figure that, no, I didn't always like what he's saying, but I hung in there with him. It's almost like people can't take those risks anymore because Bill Maher really stands out as somebody who is willing to take a shot, I saw the broadcast recently after he'd come back from dinner with President Trump, and he was like, he was a nice guy.
Yeah.
We had a great time. Like, I actually insulted him, made a joke. He took it on the chin. We continued on. It was a great evening. And it's like, holy cow, that's great. And, Bill Maher actually takes a risk in doing that, right? It's not a risk-free environment, but it's almost like we've lost the capacity for people to do that. Now it's like, no, you really better not piss. Like, they all better like what you say all the time, or else you're really in danger here.
There was a philosophy when I was working in news. My last news job, there was a television news anchor who I worked with, and he was the number one news anchor, had been there for 20 or 30 years, number one rated station. And he always thought, okay, if somebody does not like what I am reporting today, if it's I'll bring back the school board or the city council meeting that they felt was boring.
Sure.
Okay. If they did not like that, they were going to turn the channel to the other channel, to the other local network.
Whatever, sure.
They weren't going to do that. The only people who flipped the channels as far as news was concerned were the people who were working in news to see, what's the competition have? What did, I worked with one of the networks, I'm not going to say which one. I worked with one of the networks, and if the story was a school board and the news audience didn't like it, or, okay, that's boring, I'm going to see what the other network affiliated station has. They're not going to do that. People at that time, they may do it now, but people at that time didn't flip the channels because they all had the same thing. The CBS, NBC, and ABC stations, they typically all had the same stories of the day. But he was convinced that if they don't like that story, they're going to change the channel. No, they're not. Because they are so loyal to you, they're going to watch the rest of the newscast until Wheel of Fortune comes on.
Until Wheel of Fortune comes on. My God. Do you think that then how have we gotten to the point where you have like half a second of somebody's attention and they're just scrolling to the next thing? It's like there's no, how I describe a long form and short form media. It's people marry one or at most two long format styles of media. Like I'm married to Joe Rogan. He would have to kill somebody live on air for me to be like, maybe not. It's like, and I don't have time for any other relationship like that in my life. I don't want to like get to know somebody, not that he knows me, but like, I don't want to invest in, I can't, I don't have time for it, but I will date an infinite number of short form pieces of content. And I'm there for a good time, not a long time. So you better have something valuable in the first half second or I'm gonzo.
And there you go. We have a short attention span.
Attention span with dating. Yeah. But I will listen to a 3-hour podcast from Rogan. So it's like, it's not that it's both. I have a long attention span, but for very, very select number of people.
Yeah.
And then I have a tiny attention span for everybody.
Yeah. Well, when we read a news site or a website or just anything that we're looking on the internet, the people who write the content, they want you reading every single word. That's why they did it. But do we read every single word? No, we pretty much scan. We see the lead sentence. That's what happened. Then we scan it just to see what we're most interested in, and we move on. It's kind of like what you're saying there. Yeah. We have a short attention span, but we want to get those 3 or 4 seconds of what we want and then move on to the next.
It's like trying to find a slow cooker recipe, and then they go into some story about their grandma cooking it. I'm like, just stop. I just want to know, is it an onion and a half diced or minced? Like, that's all I want to know. And it's like, and then when mom like died and grandma, and it's like, did you put a bay leaf in or not? That's it. Oh, 2 bay leaves. Okay, great. Like,
and one thing there, Matt, is that they may have a producer in a booth saying, "Stretch. You still have 15 minutes left."
That's why.
Talk about your grandmother.
Oh my God, that was the problem that I ran into initially in when I had my first podcast, because I found out that the reason things get stretched on YouTube is because every second that goes by that you're watching this thing, the algorithm upregulates it. They're like, well, whatever's going on, this person watched this for 50 seconds. They only watched this one for 20 seconds. Yeah. So let's give it. So that's why you get like, I'm going to, but before I tell you, I want you, and like, it's really important. And I'm about to tell you, but I just want to, and it's like, can you just tell me? It was like, did you put the whole clove of garlic or did you smash it? Like, yeah, it's like, that's the whole nature of the attention economy. Yeah. Just get 2 more seconds out of them. Like, do whatever you can do to stretch it.
That's right. That's why they had the teasers or the bumps saying, the verdict is in on the John Smith murder trial. Right. Coming up, we'll tell you what it is. No. Tell me now. I don't want to wait 3 more minutes for a commercial.
Yeah, right.
And then you come back, and then they have a couple of other stories, and then at the end of that news block, that's when we give the verdict to that trial.
Oh my gosh,
and it happens every day.
I was 17 years old, and Eminem came out with a new music video, and I was not like a big consumer of MTV, but my buddy was like, "Hey, Eminem's coming out with this new video." I said, "I'm sorry, mama." Like, I don't know, whatever, and so I go over to his house. I'm like, "Okay, man, like I'll come watch this." And dude, they pushed that. They're like coming up, and then every time it was like the next comment. It's like right after, and then we finally get to. It was a terrible music video. It's a terrible song. Like, I don't care at all about Eminem's music video. Yeah. Like, and man, I never went back. I was 17. I got scarred for life. I'm like, I never, ever. You're either going to show me or I'm out. Like, I'm never putting up with this again.
And they put that tease at the beginning of the newscast, and you don't hear it until 30 minutes later. So.
Yeah, it's like MTV News. Yeah. Remember MTV News? It's hilarious that they like had their own spin. They're like, listen, if Fox can do it, we can do it. That's good.
And they did.
So taking all this into account, how do you teach students about integrated media? Like, what do you tell them about the landscape they're wandering into?
Well, integrated media is kind of like, it's the combination of a number of media together.
Sure, it's like integrated biology.
Yeah. Together to have this cohesive, unified message to send to an audience. And it can be video, it can be audio, it can be print, it can be billboards, it can be podcasts, it can be social media. Sure. All of these different formats of media combined into one cohesive statement or one cohesive message to send out. Because if the students know how to shoot video, and if they know how to write, they have so much. The future is so wide open for them, right? Because it's no longer, yes, I can shoot this news story and put it on our television newscast, because they're going to have a social media outlet to it. They're going to have an audio outlet to it, maybe something to put in print. Who knows? Maybe put an ad in there as far as billboards. As long as they have one one aspect of news knowledge, platform knowledge, they can spread it out exponentially.
What you're talking about with if you can shoot a video,
Mm-hmm.
but you can also write. For me, I do a lot of clips all the day long. You know, I have clips going out. And I could do 10 clips a day. I got to, you know, I think I'm actually going to set up a parallel platform that's the Ranch Podcast, more clips, because I really can only put in 2 or 3 per day. And it's like, that does not do justice to the volume and the guests and everything. So I'll have one that it's like not optimized for algorithm growth, but it's like, you know, 10 clips a day or, you know, full videos upload, things of that nature. But when I talk to people about it, because a lot of people ask, how do you do your editing? How do you, you know, get the message across, all of these things? And I always tell them it's essentially, I'm 17 again and trying to explain to my English teacher what my thesis is. And she's saying, what are you trying to say? And I'm saying, I'm trying to say this, one sentence, boom. And if you can't do that with a clip, even though it's a different medium than writing and paper, it's still the same thing. You're delivering you're delivering a message.
Right.
With the communication medium is completely different, but the struggle is still the same. Can you say clearly what the message is you're trying to get across in as few words as possible? And one, if you don't know what that message is, you can't refine it. And once you do know what the message is, do you have the capacity to shave off everything else until you get down to that?
Yeah.
And so the emphasis of you need to be able to write and do video and, you know, because the video comes and you have captions and then,
Absolutely.
you know, you also have it's amazing how easily you can, prescribe emotional reactions to things with like just, you know, a gritty filter or a different music in the background, all those different things.
Right.
You have all of this, you know, 4 to 6 layers of media that all come together in this amazing little piece of content that, if done correctly, makes people or allows people to feel a certain way, allows them to ingest a certain amount of information about the person's character, about the logical argument they're making, and then you add text to the bottom of it, which allows deeper exploration in a non-video format. All of these different things, you put it all together, and like that's one little piece of content.
Yeah.
And it's like, to get that right, I'm not a golfer, but I've heard that it's kind of like hitting the ball, just bing, you hit it just right, and you're like, got it, nailed that one.
Yeah. Same thing. I mean, it's if they can do the who, what, when, where, and why in that lead sentence, because those are the most important thing. The lead sentence of a news story is the most important story, because that's or most important sentence of the story. If you can do that and then add those other things, then your news audience says, okay, I know what that story is. I know what happened. I know that John Smith was found guilty of murder on Tuesday, and then add some more detail. But if they got that, the who, what, where, those 5 W's in the lead sentence, and then add some video there, add some other captions and things like this, they've got a new story, and they can move on.
Man, listen, I want to keep talking to you for like forever about this. The screensaver came on, which means we've been talking for an hour. I gotta go grab my son from today's his last day of school. We're taking him to ice cream.
Congratulations.
So, thank you very much. I would love to have you back and keep talking media. I feel like this is such an evolving landscape and such a, I mean, I actually have a lot of ideas for the governor races coming up that I'd love to run past you as a media person, because, you know, I think the platform that I've been cultivating is at a level now where we will be able to showcase the governor candidates in a way that has never been done before, and communicate with them in a way that has never been possible before. Like, when's the last time they did a 3-hour interview? Yeah. You know, but again, I think there are still, as you would know, there are still people that like consuming a wide variety of media content. So anyway, I have some ideas that I'd like to ask you about. But
Matt, I'd be honored. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Listen, thank you for coming in. Let's do it again. And again, I just really appreciate you.
Thanks, Matt.